Well, great. Hi, family.
Your first movie, I knew you'd make it.
My first movie starring. Well, Lewis has asked us to share some family memories. And my earliest memory, I think it was out in the house where I was born, out in the wheat field, rather, near Oakley Union. I forget whether that was the Murphy place or what. But it seemed like it was Christmas time, and I was about 4, maybe 5, I guess. And I remember Daddy and Mama had bought some of those wind-up army tanks that would shoot sparks out when they went across the floor. And we were up in the middle of the night researching about Christmas, you know how kids are, and somehow Daddy and Mama had got up and they had put those tanks out under the tree, and it seemed like it was John. John sneaked over to get one of them and accidentally turned it on. And here we are with all the lights off in the middle of the house, all of us kids gathered in there near the Christmas tree, and this tank starts toward us. The sparks are flying, the tank is loud, and it wakes Mom and Daddy up.
That's
and I'm
half as scary as Mama coming.
That's true. That's true. But it scared me, and I thought that tank was going to get me and shoot me. And so I started running and climbing up in Dan or Jack or somebody's arms to get away from that tank. And the lights came on, and Mom and Daddy came in, and so we were caught, and we knew what our Christmas presents were. But I think that was my earliest memory out in West Texas before we moved down to the farm. When we moved down to the farm, everything was exciting to me. Everything was new and fresh, and I thought we were the luckiest kids in the world. I didn't know we were poor at the time. It just never crossed my mind. But I thought we were the luckiest kids in the world to have.
It was easier to be poor.
Yeah, it was easier to be poor back then. We had a creek, and we had this farmhouse. To me, was huge. We had this huge barn. At least I thought it was big.
In a bed with only 8 kids in it.
And
Right.
I think we only had to sleep 4 to a bed there for most of the time. But we had an outhouse, a creek, fields. I mean, it was. I thought it was just great, and it was a lot of fun to me being on the farm. And one of my earliest memories was we were somehow we came out of the field. It was hot, and our neighbor, we called him D. Smith. I don't remember what his real name was, but he had this pond over on his property where his cows drank water, and it was one of those stagnant, non-flowing kinds of ponds.
Cow pond.
Yeah, a cow pond with like the green stuff, floating on the water near the bank, and so we'd rake back all that green stuff and skinny dip in the water, and learn how to swim and all that sort of stuff. And I remember one thing that really scared me as a little kid is that there we were one day, we were skinny dipping in the pond, swimming, just having a great time cooling off. And these 2 girls came riding up on horses to the pond. And all of a sudden, boom, there we were underwater. And it seemed like they knew, maybe John and Dan, I can't remember. I didn't know them, but it seemed like they knew my older brothers. And they were laughing because they caught us in the pond, and then they said they weren't going to leave. I said, well, we have to get out and go home for supper. And so they weren't going to leave, and I don't remember how they got them to leave, but I was just scared to death that I was just going to have to stay in the pond overnight. So somebody's going to have to bring me food or something because I was not going to get out of that pond. And so that was a memory I had as just a little kid.
I would have never stuck my foot in that pond with
Well, it was just
algae and worms.
Yeah, but you're a city girl, Country boys, that was just normal stuff for
I've
us.
seen every time I see one, I think of that story. A green slimy pond.
Yeah. And one of the memories I have of Daddy, of course, there was a lot of Daddy. And I was convinced that Daddy was the smartest man in the world because he fixed up this, what we call a syrup mill. And he came up with some sort of an engine to drive these big drums that would roll, and we'd stick the cane between these drums, and it would squeeze the sap out of the cane, and it would flow down into this container under the drums, and then flow downhill in this pipe down to a little shed my dad had built. And under the shed was a pan. It was, I'm not sure how long. It seemed like in my mind it was like 8 or 10 feet long and about 2 or 3 feet wide. And it had these partitions where the sap had to flow back and forth across this pan. And he had these little blocks of wood, I think, that he would let it flow so far and then stop it. And then underneath was a fire. I think it was a wood fire to keep this pan heated. And this sap would heat, and then ever so often he would pull these wooden barriers out. And I remember he would let me use this paddle he had built. It reminded me of a hoe, like a cotton hoe, but it was really a stick with a block of wood on the end, made exactly the width of these channels in the pan. And you'd put this wooden paddle between, and you'd push the sap back and forth, and then he'd stop it. By the time it got to the end of the pan, it was sorghum syrup.
It had been cooked and cooked.
Cooked and cooked. And I don't remember if he added anything to it or not. It seemed like he did. I don't remember him putting anything in there like sugar or something, but I think
Surely they must have put sugar.
I don't remember. Of course, the sorghum cane is sweet anyway, kind of like sugar cane almost. So anyway, I remember all these silver buckets. Daddy would buy these stacks and stacks of silver buckets. And I remember hanging these buckets on the spigot at the end of this big pan. And when the syrup was finished, he would open that spigot and fill buckets of this sorghum syrup. And I used to look at that whole process as a little kid thinking, this is marvelous. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. My daddy is the most brilliant man because he could make this whole thing work, and you could get syrup out of this spigot. And to me, it was free syrup. Of course, I didn't think about the planting of the cane, planting of it, and hoeing and all that sort of stuff because I was so small. I do remember being up on the horse-drawn wagon as Jack and Dan and the others would use a wooden, like I call it a machete, like a wooden machete to strip the leaves off of the cane. And then we'd take it over and send it through the rollers and finally end up with syrup coming out into these buckets. And I seem to recall, Daddy talked about, of course we used it too, but I seem to recall him talking about selling it around the county. I think we sold it to help,
Oh, if he made that much, that's what it was for.
to help defray our costs on the farm. But I can remember, and also, I don't know how often Daddy did this, but sometime the very last part of the last batch, he would cook it until it became hard like candy. And then he would break it up into pieces and take it out of the pan, and we had syrup candy. And we'd take it to school. Our school lunches as, dessert, and we'd take it to school. And we'd trade it to all the kids at school, even the city kids who never got stuff like that. We'd trade it for what we call real stuff, like packaged brownies and stuff like that, because we thought that was real stuff, and they thought what we had was real stuff. I guess there's a lesson there somewhere, I guess.
There's a lesson there somewhere.
But
I know exactly what he's talking about because we have a apple orchard farm that the kids from school take field trips to, and they have a sorghum thing, and a donkey pushes it around and around while it grinds the stuff into the liquid, and then they take it over to the syrup thing, and they're long sticks that were flat, and they showed us just how they did it. So I can see it in my mind what he's talking about.
So was this cane grown there on the farm? Do you
yes,
remember?
we grew the sorghum cane, what we call the back 40. You go across the creek and up through the gate, and it seemed like we went toward the back of the farm to the right, whatever direction that was. And we just had long rows of this sorghum cane. And I remember the older brothers stripping the leaves off and cutting it off at the ground. And I'd set up on the seat of Kate and Bess, our team, would pull this wagon, and I'd sit up there. And whenever Jack would tell me to move it, I'd do the reins and move it up a little bit, and them loading it up. And then when the cane was crushed, when it came out of those rollers, of course it was just crushed cane. And then for some reason we called it pummy. I don't know why, but we called it pummy. And we would toss it off this hill. There was a hill there, and we would just toss it over the hill, and it created a huge a pummie pile. Like, there you go. Uh, off the side of this little embankment, this hill
I've
there.
heard that.
And I can remember as a kid, we used to run and jump and flip onto this soft pile.
I think the cows would like to eat that.
I don't remember if they did or not. They might have. But I remember how we got just covered with syrup, just sap, and
And
then
then the dirt sticks to the
dirt
sap.
sticks to it, and
Oh.
we were sweet kids though. See?
Yeah.
So anyways, and obviously have to take a bath and all that sort of stuff. So I do want to tell one memory about Mama.
Okay.
Mama, one of the things we like to play as kids everywhere on the farm, and when we moved on the farm was Army. We wanted to play Army.
Mm-hmm.
We were just enthralled with Army. I think maybe Louis might have been the one that got us headed in that direction because he was a soldier and
Mm-hmm.
he came to marry Edna and he had this uniform and Louis gave us it was like an Army backpack, rucksack or backpack or something, had U.S. Army on it. And he gave us that, and we used that thing for years. We must have walked for miles carrying that thing stuffed full of everything,
Mm-hmm.
And so it got us thinking about Army. And so Mama had this little song she used to sing. When I was just a kid, she'd rock us on the front porch or talk to us. And she had this, it's a little like a nursery rhyme called There's Something About a Soldier That Is Fine, Fine, Fine. There's something about his buttons, how they shine, shine, shine. There's something about his daring. There's something about his bearing. There's something about a soldier that is fine, fine, fine. And she used to sing that little nursery rhyme. And so I always wanted to be a soldier. Well, finally I became a soldier.
Right.
And finally got promoted to lieutenant colonel.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved to here in Tennessee. I was stationed at Fort Campbell, and Dad had passed away years earlier, and so Mom came up to see us not long after we got here to Fort Campbell. And so she was very impressed by soldiers. Doesn't matter whether they were private or a general.
Right.
But she had never met a general. So we went to this big, huge change of command ceremony at Fort Campbell when General Thompson became the two-star general of the area.
Right.
And I was a lieutenant colonel on the staff for communications.
Mm-hmm.
So I was invited to the reception after this big change of command ceremony. Well, since Mother was here, we took her to the parade, and she was totally dazzled. About 20,000 soldiers marching to the Army band that had marched in front of
She
them.
just sat and
Oh,
clapped.
she was so totally impressed with that. All those soldiers. And then we went to the headquarters where they had this little tent set up for snacks and stuff. So we were under this little tent, having snacks and drinking Kool-Aid and stuff like that. And she said, now will I get to meet a real general? And I said, Mom, he'll be around in a little while. I'll introduce you to General Thompson. And she said, okay. Well, you know how Mother was slow and she liked to pick at food and stuff. And so she was looking down this table of snacks. Well, here came General Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Mother is 5 feet,
Barely 5
barely
feet.
5 feet, really short.
Mm-hmm.
General Thompson is 6'6". He's a big guy
Yeah.
and just a real nice guy. And so here he comes under the tent. So Mother is over here, and she's got like cookies in this hand, and she's got a cup of punch in this hand. And just as she turns around, General Thompson shows up. And so I motioned to him to come over. And he walks up, and she turns around and runs into his chest.
Oh,
She got cookies and juice, and her nose is about right here
Oh,
in his chest. And she hits him, and she backs up like this,
Looking at
and she looks up at him. He's 6'6", and she's like 4'8" or whatever, 5. And she looks up at him. She didn't say a word. She looks over at me. She said, now, is this a real general? I said, yes, Mom, he's a real
And then
general.
she commenced to Jew you out because you had made her get that punch. Now I can't shake hands. What am I going to do with this stuff? And you said, here, I'll tell you, Mom. So
And he just
took
laughed.
He
And
said, I have a mama too. I know what mamas
Yeah.
are like.
And when she said, now, is this a real general? He laughed, and he said, sometimes you just have to, everything has to be put in perspective.
That's right.
of who you are and what's important. And so, and to him, she was important because she was a mother of one of his soldiers, um, and so she was extremely impressed that she got to meet a real general. And she shook his hand and he talked to her, about the army. It's pretty impressive. So those are some of just a few of the memories that I have.
Well, it was a very big family. I mean, I hadn't been around anybody with so many kids before in one family. But they were very close. Some of the older ones had already gone away because Max was third from the bottom. So it was just Connie and Mac and Bruce and Frank.
John was
John was still at home.
Yeah.
And John was the older one with a car and a driver's license. And so when I was 14 years old, Max was 15 when we started dating in high school. And John was the only one that could drive anywhere. So Max was constantly asking him, take me over to Sandy's, just take me over there. Her mama bring me home. But we lived in the woods. I mean, you had to go down a hill and up the hill and down through the mud and the rock on a dirt road. And he said, good grief, you need a tank. This is going to ruin my car. And he hated driving over there. But Max would squeal enough till he'd bring him over there to see us. But we hadn't been dating very long at all. Mr. Holt came in and he said, well, Mac and Sandy, he said, I know you're young, but whenever you get ready to marry, just let me know and I'll sign. And I said, we
were just
always
dating.
very bold. And I remember once we had Steve, Mac was in Vietnam, and I lived at home and just 2 miles from my mother-in-law and lived with my mother. So we were constantly with each other, and she took my babies and rocked them and sang There's Something About a Soldier. And I just cried. Then we'd work together, putting boxes together to send him when he was in Vietnam. Miss Holt we'd make cookies all day and box them up. And then one day, she had the lollipop. I don't know where it was from. That great big lollipop.
Is that the one she sent me in OCS? Or?
Yeah, when you were in OCS.
Yeah, that lollipop got me in big trouble.
Yeah. That was the first time away
Mom.
from home when he went to OCS, yeah.
Yeah, Mother got you that lollipop to send to me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was just there, and we got all finished with the cookies, and we had this lollipop. She said, reckon you'd eat that? And I said, they'll eat anything. They're so hungry.
Yeah.
So we put this great big lollipop in the box on the bottom of the cookies, and whatever they got, they had to share. So I'm not sure if you even got a cookie that day. But down in the bottom of the box was that lollipop. So Meg said, I'm going to keep that for myself. And later at night, I'll lay in bed and eat that thing.
Now, what she's talking about is before I graduated from OCS and went to Vietnam.
Yeah.
This was while I was in OCS, and they sent us that stuff. And
Ooh, and they were strict. You didn't have any. It's called Pokebait. You couldn't have that, anything like that. Well, he got tired of eating it, so he just stuck it underneath his pillow, and he thought, I'll get that later. Well, they came in and inspected his room and found a lollipop under his pillow.
Oh no.
And at the next assembly or
Formation.
they called out candidate Lollipop to come to the front, and nobody moved. And Max said, "Lollipop." Oh no! And he said, I'm only going to say it one time, and then the entire class is going to do so and so. And so Max stepped out and he said, could that be me? He said, I believe so.
Oh,
I don't
boy.
know how many push-ups he had to do for that lollipop.
I had to do 100, as I recall. I had to do 100 push-ups
All in a row.
for that lollipop.
But we had a good time, her and I, putting things together for
Yeah,
him.
and everybody else got to go to breakfast, and I had to do push-ups because they caught me with that lollipop. And I didn't know Mama had given you that lollipop.
We were together the day I boxed that up, and I don't know where it came from, but it was there.
Well, it was good,
Yeah,
because you didn't get any sweet stuff hardly, so it was really good. But
while it lasted.
while it lasted, and when they said, "Well, the real candidate lollipop stepped forward," it didn't take me long to figure out who they were talking about.
They could have busted you out. I mean, they used to.
Well,
kick them
usually
out for nothing.
They didn't, because they expected people to try to get snacks or something, because we had that.
It was abuse. They were starving them.
Well, at a meal, you had 7 minutes to eat at a meal, and you had to sit on the front 4 inches of your chair.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to eat what they call a square meal, like this. And so you couldn't get a lot of food in 7 minutes.
You know,
So
Mama
we were hungry all the time.
and the wife were real worried they weren't getting enough food. So
But Mama helped out with that lollipop, even though I had to do push-ups. I think it was worth it.
Well, that's
and
good to know.
another thing about the family that used to kind of gross me is that she was just born, you know, and raised in the country, and we were going to CMAC. They were taking me out to
Augusta, Georgia.
to live with it, and they wouldn't let me drive by myself. They wanted to drive me out there. Mr. Holt put a big old black circle on the back of his white station wagon, and I followed him. He said, "You just look at that circle and you follow me, and don't let that circle get out of your." I'll tell you, I got tired of looking at that circle. But she was packing up a bunch of food the night before, and she was frying chicken for us to take with us. And she took out some newspaper and put it on the counter, and she cut up that chicken on that newspaper. Then she cut up some steak pieces, and all that ink was soaking into the chicken meat and
Oh,
everything.
no.
That gave it flavor. She
And-
always did that.
And then she dipped it in the milk and stuff and flour, and then she fried it and cooked it. And I couldn't eat all that meat on that trip. I said, "Mother, she was cutting it up on a newspaper. That's the dirtiest thing." And the things she tried to feed my kids, you know, I wanted to do exactly what the doctor said, and she said it won't hurt them. If they could get it down, she thought it's okay. And pinto bean juice on a 2-month-old, you know.
Yeah.
She fed him all this bean juice, and he had it all over his face and just smiling and up all night with gas, you know. I go, "I'm never going over to see that woman again. She's killing my child."
But I try to tell Sandy, I said, you know, she raised 10 of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All 10 survived
Mhm.
in decently good health.
Yeah.
And she
So-
had very good advice, I must admit. Some of her advice was good.